Who wears flannels? Lesbians. So let's talk about The Starling Girl, which is a film that came out this year in 2023, which I actually did not really hear anything about it, and I am kind of like surprised by that because I do follow quite a few indie movie pages, and it premiered at Sundance. The director, Laura Parmet, is a 2019 Sundance Screenwriters Intensive Fellow, and the film began writing in 2017. So I could be wrong, but I do think that the film came out of that Sundance Screenwriting Intensive. And you know, like at the end of the day, Laurel, like slay girl, like that's great for you. Like she has a crazy portfolio, and like from 2017 to now, like she's doing her thing, you know, like good for you. I'm about to start with an overall review for the film, and then I'm gonna go in, I think, just talking about a lot of details and specific scenes, right? So my overall review of The Starling Girl is that I definitely think it's worth the watch. It definitely kept me interested throughout the whole film, and I did enjoy the portrayal of Christian fundamentalism in this culture. And another thing about the backstory looking into it is that the director actually went into one of these spaces where she, I guess, hung out with Christian fundamentalist women, and she was like a little bit at first judgmental, she says, about that culture. She says, learn that the women believe that their desires were sinful. There's a woman in the church who had an affair with a church authority member, and she received the blame instead of him. When I first heard of these stories, I was like, their world is so backwards. I'm so glad that my life's not like this. The more I thought about it, the more I saw how much we actually had in common in terms of how we grew up, our relationship with our bodies, and when society teaches us to feel about our desires. She says that she drew from her own experiences in a relationship she had as a teenager. And she says, she decided that I wanted to tell a story looking back at my experience, set it in a world that, while extreme and specific, has so much in common with the culture at large. I do think there's a little bit of difficulty when you're a woman making films, especially that stars a woman. I feel like everyone wants to be like, this is about you. What about this is your life? And I think that's really unfair because I definitely don't think male directors, the many of times they made a film starring men, they're like, is this about you? Is this your life? So this is included, but to be fair, like I kind of wish it wasn't. And if she wants to speak about it, that's fine. But like I'm not judging her. I'm judging more about like the environment that really brings that out of women filmmakers. I really do enjoy the fact that she did spend time with this sort of environment and this culture. She recognized how even in this extreme setting of Christian fundamentalism, there's quite a lot of things relating to American. You don't even have to be American. I just think like the world, man. You don't need to be growing up in a Christian fundamentalist group to know what it's like as a girl to be shamed, to be sexualized by the world around you, to have like that weird obsession and like repression. You don't really need to be part of any sort of like religious group to kind of experience that in America. Not even America, I just think the world, honestly, like that's just such an aspect of like growing up. So I do enjoy that she had that perspective coming in, because I do think lots of people who don't grow up in like the South or places that don't really have any sort of like religious, I don't know, like pressure or culture, whatever you want to say, they're going to be really judgmental of it. And I'm very critical myself of religion and honestly the South and all these things, but I did grow up in the South and like in an environment where like one of my closest friends was a pastor's daughter, and she would often tell me like, I hope you change your ways before you go to hell. And I'd be like, oh, you're so silly. Like that was literally the vibes growing up. Not everyone was like that, of course, there's like a spectrum. People from cities like New York City or LA that are often making these films are very critical without having any perspective in their mind to see the relation between both places and the cultures. And it's very classist at the end of the day. And they don't want to acknowledge like, oh, a big part of it is also like here as well. Like all this shaming, all this obsession with teenage girl sexuality, all this repression and like pressure and obsession, like this is, you don't need to be in this like culty vibes to experience that, you know. That's some of the backstory about how this film is made. However, I do have a criticism that I do think the film overall just played it a bit too safe. Certain aspects of it, you do kind of expect where it's going, and then the payoff at the end, which I'll get to later, like I'm not gonna spoil it, I just think overall it played it too safe. And even though Laurel, this director, is like slaying the game. I just feel like the first feature is really a place where you can just go balls to the walls, like show the world what you're about, really experiment. Like that's really where you like just go so hard and show everyone like what you can do and what your vision is and what you want to contribute to the canon of cinema. That's what I think the first feature should be. And this feature just really did play it safe. You know, if you were to compare sort of the films of the 90s, when Sundance, I think, began to really pop off, they were also singular and they were kind of like very representative of distinct voices in cinema, right? You got like just a lot of directors that had really distinct styles coming out. And I just don't think that's the case anymore for an institution like Sundance, especially when as they continue to have these programs that on the surface look really great, you know, the writer's intensive of Sundance, like who doesn't want to be a part of that as a filmmaker? That would probably change your life. They mold you into the Sundance genre, and instead of, I think, truly being what they once were, which was a festival that like pushed uplifted indie films. It's not just me saying this, honestly. Like you can find an article on IndieWire where, you know, the super cool like queer punk cinema icon Greg Araki discusses how he was born at the exact right moment to ignite 90s queer punk rock cinema. Honestly, this title itself frustrates me a bit because it's not even about queer punk rock cinema. It's more just like the fact that he was able to make films entirely by himself and get it shown to Sundance. Like, is that the case now? I really don't think so. I do think they kind of like have such a genre of films that they want in their festival. And even Greg Araki acknowledges, like, you know, the films when I was in it, that was totally different environment than what's occurring now. And this is not so much of a criticism on the director Laurel. This is just a criticism of the system in general. Where are the films that are really pushing the boundaries? And I also think this is just speaks to the larger environment, or what's the word, climate of film at the moment, because not like as Martin Scorsese says in this GQ article, like he believes, you know, the film industry is dead. He says this because, you know, everything that's not the super billion-dollar budget blockbuster is put into the indie film sphere. And what is indie film then? Because is it just any film that has a personal story, any film that has a personal perspective? Because that's such a giant like portion of films. And at the end of the day, like where are the really tiny films going? Like where are they? Like, you know what I mean? And it just seems with this programs of like a writing intensive where they sort of like mold your script to fit the Sundance genre to then go to Sundance and hope that you get one to acquire your film. Like that just program, I feel like just perpetuates like a lack of originality, a lack of voice, lack of pushing boundaries. But it does make me frustrated because even though I think this director is like I said, like obviously smart, emotionally intelligent, you know, caring, like interesting film, it's very safe. Like at the end of the day, that's what I feel. I think not only me, but just everyone, like we want films that, I like films that are not so much, I'm not talking about shock value, like films that are just about shock value, I couldn't care less about those. But my favorite kind of films are ones that have some authenticity and some unexpected likeness coming from either the craft or the story or something. And the unexpectedness doesn't just come like in a shallow way, but it comes with a lot of meaning. You know, those are my favorite kind of films. And the Starling Girl, at the end of the day, like lovely film, but you can't help but to ignore that it feels like a lot of what we're seeing has been done. And that in itself is a little bit creepy. My perspective on the film is about a girl being groomed a little bit. That's kind of what I read the film as. The age of, or she's 17, it says in the log line. I actually didn't know watching it. Like, I was like, how old is she? It was kind of hard to know because she acted at points really mature. Then clearly the main interest, he's like older than her, but you don't really know exactly how old, or at least I didn't pick that up in my first watch. So a lot of it, I was like, I was trying to understand the dynamic a little bit, and it did just feel like it was just another, not want to say just another film, because I do think that's such an important story to tell. The greatest strength of the film is the emotional intelligence. Like, there are just little moments, and something would be told with just a gesture that makes it feel so much more like alive and like real and authentic. So that's for me the strongest thing. And of course the acting is really, really good. The girl that plays Jem is so good. The main love interest, he did a good job, but I can't even lie to you. This is so ridiculous, and I'm sorry I'm even saying this, but he looked like if you're making a Sims, and you like, when you're, you know, putting each feature how big you want it to be, when it came to his mouth, you just scroll it to the tiniest setting of what the mouth is. It was a little distraction. But he did such a good job, and I also thought he was a hottie. When you first see him in that whole like Bible studies youth group, I think is what it's called. Yeah, I was just like, oh yeah, if I was a Bible girl, like, and he was my youth group leader, I would be all over that for sure. Like, and then this was one of my most interesting aspects of the film is when the main character begins to be interested in him. It's a little bit like you don't really know exactly how he's gonna respond. At first I was like, is this the first film I'm gonna see where a teen girl likes an adult man and has the moral backbone, just normal consciousness of rejecting that teen girl? Like, I'm like, that's kind of how it felt first, because she was going after him and then he was seemingly like not interested at first, and I was like, is this the first one I'm gonna see that where this finally freaking happens? And no. He very quickly puts on his little groomer boots and gets his groomer game on, and that's where the film goes. So to summarize my overall review, worth the watch. I wish it would have revealed the director's distinct voice a little bit more, but definitely still like very emotionally intelligent, and the acting's very good. Like how she mentioned that she experienced how someone had an affair with an authority group and all the blame went on her, and that's kind of what occurs in this film. And it's so gut-wrenching to watch it and experience it with this teen girl of like everyone slut-shaming and blaming her for her relations with this adult authority group in the church. And she has to go through really humiliating experiences of, you know, the father of the man, who I think is the pastor. There's a conversation between that guy, the mom, and her that was so gut-wrenching to watch and so humiliating. And so encapsulating, I think, about like so many issues of like our culture at large, and just like sort of like this shaming, like hyper focus on women's sexuality, because then it's like no one really gave the accountability to that man. And the mom tries to a little bit stand up, but the mom is such an interesting flawed character, because there's little moments where she tries to be like good or interesting here, but then she's just so indoctrinated into this world that she really puts her daughter through hell. It's really terrible. And then after that, she has to stand in front of the entire church. This happened, and I hope you can all forgive me. When the man does not have to go through the same, they're like, okay, if anyone wants to go and forgive her for what she's done, go up. I love this. I thought this was such a beautiful moment. The little sister runs up, first person to run up to her, like without saying much, but full of emotion. You can see that she's hurting for her sister, and she says, I forgive you, and hugs her. Like, I thought that was probably my favorite moment in the film. I thought that was so beautiful. This is dark, but the exploration of drug abuse, you know, the mom casually taking pills and the father having a drinking problem, that the mother has to hide behind doors, that because no one really talks about things, everyone wants to hide what's actually going on. I thought that was like spot on observation of American culture, like especially white people culture, I would say. Like, those things I thought were done quite well. However, one little pet peeve I had, which is not even this film's problem. My issue is when you have like, you know, Hollywood or indie people from New York, Hollywood, LA, whatever, going to the South and be like, this is interesting. It's really rare that you see a good portrayal of the South.
I'm confused. Why?
Even without me wanting to, it's so distracting for me when I notice things that are like, feel very inauthentic to the South. And I think what is such a big part of it is like these filmmakers go to these places and they want to put everyone in a flannel, okay? Still the texture of the clothes, of their haircuts, of the environment. It just, so often, it's like really hard to find a very good authentic portrayal of the American South. And actually, like, speaking on the flannel, like, people don't, honestly, like, do people in the South even wear flannels? I don't think so. Who wears flannels? Lesbians. Literally, they have all these, like, men in their little flannels, and they look more like lesbians rather than, like, people from the actual South. Because people from the South, they really identify with their environment. They are so proud about where they come from in their hometown. They're like, I love this place, I'm never gonna leave. And you're like, okay girl, if that's what makes you happy, do that.
I cut this part out because it was too long, but if you want to see me talk about this, smash the like button. You know I do what my adoring fans want me to do, so don't be shy. You can tell me in the comments.
Oh, this is the ending, so like, girl, like, skip if you haven't seen it, like, and I'll put the timestamp here.
Disappointed!
The very, very end where she steals his car and drives away to the bar that her dad used to play at. It didn't work for me, but it was just, oh, she left her cultish family, she left this obviously toxic guy, but like, what is she gonna do? I felt very concerned for her, honestly, and her safety, and like, what choice is she making? I guess the easiest thing to answer is like, she's leaving, but then it's like, what's next? And I guess you don't have to answer that. However, the moment where she just goes to this bar and then she starts listening to music and starts dancing, and the beat of her asking for a phone and then getting up to dance, I think was really forced. And then finally, I do think the ending with her just dancing is so... I think the easiest way of showing like, she's in this really scary position, she left, but she's happy. Or not she's happy, like, oh, she can do what she likes. And on paper, I guess that makes sense, but that's kind of what I mean. For me, it just did not work, and I just thought it was way too safe of an ending. And I do think there's a bit of a trend right now, and it's particularly indie film. If you want to have a deep moment without words, you just have a character dancing, and personally, I hate it. I think it's so overdone, and I just feel like in things like Nowness, every other film is like, this is a meditation on what it means to not shave your armpits, and it's not a freaking meditation, it's just people dancing. It was like, this was such a strong film, and then the very, very end, that last beat, it did not work for me, and it was such a safe ending, and it didn't really tell us anything more about this character and her story. That doesn't mean, obviously, that you can never use dance. One of my favorite endings of all time, I think, has a moment of dancing to close off the film, and that is Claire Denis' Butch Vi. And if you haven't seen it, don't worry, like, still watch it, even though I mentioned that. Like, there's so much to take from the film. That film is all about like hyper masculinity and perhaps like a homoerotic sexual tension that's repressed, but you don't really know exactly. And this character is such a like soldier, he's strong, and he's like just that guy, and then contemplating suicide in this entire environment. And then at the very end, they play Corona and he starts dancing his ass off, and it's amazing. It's so unexpected, and at once makes so much sense, but at once so inexplicable, and at once like just the perfect ending to this film. I think that is kind of what I mean a little bit about films, that they don't do things just for the shock value, but it's still unexpected in a way that really makes sense and works. Like, that's such an amazing ending, and no other film really has like an ending like that, in my opinion, where you're just staying with these hypnotic like masculine men working out and in the trance of like the army and all these things and revenge and these dark things, and then you end it with like this club song Corona, and I'm just going crazy. So I'm not saying she had to dance to Corona. I just, like I said, the ending, I think, is the very, very end moments. I wish it kind of maybe showed us a little bit more of the character. I don't know, I understand the intention, I just thought it was very safe. So I think on that note, that is pretty much my review. Oh, okay, and to end off my review, I have to talk about this scene that violently took me out of the world. And this is kind of what I mean when I say the details of the world building of the South gets lost when these LA and New York girlies come in and do their thing, you know. And I'm not talking about women filmmakers. When I say girlies, that's a very gender neutral term for me, so everyone knows. And I feel like such a jerk roasting this scene and pointing it out, but I have to. Like, I have to. So there's a scene in the middle of the film where the mom and the daughter are shopping in a supermarket. And for some reason, these white girlies find themselves in the Hispanic aisle. And how do I know? Because behind the mom is Arina Pan. And then on the other side is all of Goya's products. You know, because how like in supermarkets they put every like Latino thing like in one little area. The mom, she grabs her pancakes. That makes sense. White people love pancakes. I'm like, okay, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I'm wrong. Oh no, what happens? The daughter grabs a Goya's like flavoring. And I'm like, girl. You know these white people are not using Goya flavoring in their food, girl. Do you think these Christian fundamentalists are using flavoring in their food? No. Does that mean that they never eat Latino food? No, that's not what it means. You know what these white people are gonna do? They're gonna go every week to their local Mexican restaurant or what have you, and have their little Mexican meals. And they're gonna be like, oh, thank you, Eduardo, for like bringing this to me. And they're gonna be nice to him. And as soon as Eduardo turns his back, they're gonna say the most racist shit they can. And they're gonna eat the food, they're gonna eat it up, they're gonna love it. And they're gonna be like, oh my gosh, to the wall. Oh my gosh. I don't even want to say what they're gonna say, like, terrible things. And I'm saying this because it's my childhood. There's no way in hell these people are in that little aisle buying their Goya things. They're not using that flavor. They're not doing it. So that moment violently took me out of that scene. Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. Like, those details, to me, when you're going to the South and you want to make these films, those details matter, okay? But besides that, beautiful film, emotionally sensitive, great acting, really good feature debut, you know, like at the end of the day. I said it's too safe. I want the director to not push her boundaries more, but like show your voice more, honestly. And I'm definitely gonna keep watching what she has to do. I'm definitely gonna keep watching what the main actress is gonna do as well. She killed it. So that's my first movie review. So if you like my movie review, you know, you can put a like. If you think like I had smart things to say or whatever, you know, you can subscribe. It's okay, you know, you don't have to, like, I don't care. Oh, I guess finally, if there's any films you want me to review, put it in the bottom, you know.